So I've got stuck into the bus mix now. Let's have a look at everything we've done here, and I started off again with the drums. So solo these up. And the first thing on here is this virtual mix bus. And I've selected the second group now, so all the mix buses are on group 2, and I've gone for the Brit End setting again, driven the input, a bit of drive. It's just warming that drum group up a little bit. And also we've got this compressor that I'll probably bring the threshold down for this a little bit. So Slate Digital FG401, so it's modelled on some nice classic analog units. I've got a very slow attack, very fast release ratio, maybe push this up to about 3. So with that slow attack and fast release, we're not really compressing the transients of the drums, we're just compressing the tails just to make them a bit more snappy, a bit more punchy. I can mute this. And you know, it's quite subtle really, that compressor. There's only about 3 dB of compression there, but it's on the whole group. I think if we loop this section, we've got all the drums. Yeah, so 2 or 3 dB of compression. And just gelling the drums together. And then after that, I've got the Slate Digital VTM, the virtual tape machine. I went into this settings and I just reduced the noise. I didn't take it off completely. It's quite nice to have a bit of that noise in there, but just took it down a bit. And I just loaded this up. I didn't really do anything other than I disengaged the output with that button on. If you drive the input, the output will decrease. You can't overdrive it. But what I did was unchecked it and just pulled the output down a little bit. And the reason for that was so I could reference, you know, that's without the tape machine. It's peaking at 8 dB. Turn it on. It's peaking it around the same, minus 7.9. So you can really hear what it's doing to the sound. And it adds a nice bit of weight, a bit of a low end, I think. And it also takes away some of the harshness in the high frequency. And everything else I left the same. I did tweak with the different machine types and tape types, but this default setting just seemed to work quite well for these drums. And then after that, I added the Eosis Air EQ and just a subtle boost in the top frequency. So we're just adding a bit of air to that high frequency. Oh. Mute this. It's just brightening things up. I think this analyzer is quite CPU intensive, so that's why it's crashing there. And this bus send, we can turn that off. I did try and do some parallel processing on these drums and send them to another bus channel and play with the compression settings, but I don't think it really needed it. It wasn't really working with these drums, so it was just to maybe look at bringing out the transients a bit, but it didn't really work, so I've not bothered with that. So next up, the bass and sub. Not much happening here other than the mix bus and a subtle bit of compression, which with slow attack and slow release times is just maybe helping the bass and sub kind of gel together a bit more. Take the drums out. I thought compressing together would make it sound like it's one synth or one sound rather than 2 separate sounds that are being processed independently. So next up was the ARPs. And we looked at some of this stuff in the previous video, but I've added the mix bus on here, and also I've added some compressing these ARPs together. Again, using this FG401, really nice compressor. about 3 dB of compression. We've already had the Pro C taken off the peaks, so this is more for less for like dynamics and more for just vibe really, so maybe don't need to compress by another 3 dB. It's to help stuff gel. And I've done some stuff with this FGN, which is like modelled on an EV-EQ. So I've done a high shelf. I boosted 3K by about 2 dB. I've also boosted a little bit at 1.5K. And it's just brought out some tops and some kind of mids. But these sort of EQs add high frequency in a really nice way that's kind of quite pleasant and never sort of harsh sounding. So just bringing it out, that EQ and compression. Then the vocals, I added the Eosis, and again it's crashed when I load up the Eosis because I can't handle that analyzer, I think. But you know, some air, some boost around the high mids. I just thought the vocal was getting a bit lost in the mix, so this was just kind of bringing it out a little bit, so it gets lost without it a little bit. And then finally the effects and the pads have just got the mix bus. So this is subtle, this mix bus, but if you apply the virtual channel strip on all your individual channels, then the mix bus, like the channel on or virtual channel on all your kind of individual instruments and sounds, and then put that mix bus on all your bus groups, and play with some of the settings and just kind of drive the input a little bit, and it does make a difference, I think, like all together when you're using so many of these plugins. And then on the master output, again I've got a virtual mix bus. I've gone for group 3 this time, and the Brit End setting, driven the input a bit, and added a bit of drive. Drive it a bit more. So it's sounding quite nice now. Lots of stereo movement. Keep referencing mono. And stuff's not disappearing to phase or anything. Probably have the sub drop out of this breakdown. And maybe have this riser there. Introduce the section a bit better. Maybe drop out some of these drums as well just before it all kicks in. Do the same over here. The second breakdown. Quite happy with how that's sounding now, really. The next thing we want to do is I'm going to show you my process that I've started doing recently. Is actually just, I've got a Revox B77 tape machine, and I actually just bounced the whole mix onto tape and then could bring it back into the computer, and it's like what this tape machine was doing on the drums. It's just going to, this really helps the mix kind of gel together. It compresses it, it softens the transients, it adds nice warmth, and it takes away some of that clinical digital sound in top end. So we'll look at that process in the next video. All right, cheers.